If I try generate Ghibli style artwork on AI, would I be infringing some sort of copyright?
There is a sort of linked concept in intellectual property, which are the rights to be identified as the author of any work that you've created. Also, the right not to have something falsely attributed to you. I'm cautious about the idea of creativity. I think humans create, machines generate.
Hi everyone, welcome to CUHK Podcast. I am Anthea, your student host and a Bachelor of Law student. Today, we'll be diving into the complex legal and ethical questions surrounding AI generated art, especially when it copies the iconic style of Studio Ghibli. We're really privileged to have Professor Steve Gallagher with us today. Hi, Professor
Thank you very
Gallagher.
much for having me along.
Yeah. So before we start, please do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our social media for our latest updates. Now, let's dive right in. So let's start simple. From a legal perspective, what do you think are some unique challenges or opportunities AI art generation tools present as compared to, let's say, traditional digital art creation methods?
Well, some very interesting challenges and opportunities, as you point out, Anthea, mainly to do with the area of law known as intellectual property law. So, intellectual property law is the area of law that's meant to protect, in a limited way, the things that we create. So, it encourages human creativity. So, the most well known area is, of course, the area of copyright. And copyright is, again, this right that we have in all of the things that we create, whether it's something written, a drawing, a painting, a sculpture, anything along those lines, that we have the right to restrict people from copying what we've actually created. We can allow them to do so, but usually they have to compensate us in some way. They license it from us, but otherwise they're restricted. It's a restriction that exists in most jurisdictions automatically. It arises and it protects our authored works even after our death. So our estates, our heirs can make use of this right for about 50 years, usually in most jurisdictions after our death.
Hmm.
So that's the sort of the area that's a problem because of the way that generative AI works.
So assume that Ghibli style artwork is copyrighted, in some way protected by intellectual property.
Definitely, but
Mm,
the problem is intellectual property rights are to do with copying works, not copying styles of
mm,
works. And of course, Ghibli, the way that say Open AI have developed their ChatGPT 4.0 and the Ghibli style creation, well, it's a style rather than actually copying an artwork itself. So that's a bit more of a grey area about protection.
So to put this more simply, if I try generate Ghibli style artwork on AI, would I be infringing some sort of copyright?
At the moment, I would say no. And that's why you may know in Japan, they're actually thinking about introducing some legislation, some written laws to actually deal with the issues. Whether that's going to be successful is also a problem. I mean, general principles of copyright, you can't copyright a style. And that's the issue that's going on here. If someone copies an actual Ghibli image, then that is a problem. If you copy a style, not so much of a problem.
So in this case, how can artists or studios protect their unique styles against AI?
I'm not sure they can.
You know?
And I'm not even sure they should, which possibly is a little bit more controversial. Um, because of the way that AI works, then I think we're seeing more of us able to make use of these tools. And I think we are going to see more and more people seeing their styles of work, whether it's a style of writing, whether it's a style of a drawing or painting or sculpture, whatever else, being copied by others and relatively easily as well. So I can understand their frustration, but I don't think the law actually deals with it now, and I'm not sure it should. I think you've got to be very careful because, humans have always copied other artists, other authors, and copied their styles. And it's the way that often artists have developed. In fact, they've often copied the artworks themselves. A lot of, painters start off by copying paintings of great masters or whatever else. And then they maybe develop their own paintings and maybe do something in the style of someone else. Picasso famously would do paintings in the style of other famous artists at times as an homage to other artists. But I think probably what's frustrating to artists today is how easy this is for even people like me who aren't artists at all to be able to, get some photographs or generate an image in a Ghibli style. I can understand why they're frustrated,
Mm.
but I don't think the law protects them, and I'm not sure it should.
Yeah, I think there's a really fine line between like inspiration and direct copying. Yeah.
Yes, that's really it. The inspiration side but it's being developed, and of course the technology does it in ways that we've never seen before, which again is what's so frustrating for the artists.
I see. So legally, we know that there might be some gray areas, but ethically, it seems a bit broader and deeper than just copyright, since you're kind of like replicating an entire artist's lifetime of work. So, should there be any specific guidelines or considerations in the development or use of AI generated art tools?
Again, I think this is something that a number of jurisdictions are looking at. Um, I'm worried about this because I think we may all have our own feelings about this, but to talk about it as a sort of an ethical issue where we might all agree on something, I think it'd be difficult to find agreement. I mean, there are already many artists who are already making use of this technology as well. Um, they're going to be pushing the boundaries of what other artists may consider to be ethically justifiable. If we try to legislate, if we try to bring in codes or anything else, I think there'll always be people breaking those, and it depends how we actually want to enforce these matters. There could be a move, maybe internationally, to try and come up with a code which is incorporated into some treaty, which perhaps each jurisdiction would then bring in as some sort of regulations or whatever. But to try and get all those jurisdictions agreeing, I mean, I can't see the United States agreeing to restrict OpenAI in its market when OpenAI is desperate to make money at the moment. It needs something to sort of monetize its generative AI systems. So I think that's a problem.
So, the binding effect it actually has would be kind of like minimal or less effective.
I can't see we're going to get the international community agreeing. I think it's going to be difficult within jurisdictions. Again, even within Japan, I know that there are people who've got differing views about this. So if Japan legislates, maybe we'll see actually enforcing any legislation in Japan against those who are outside of Japan as well will be problematic.
Mm.
There is a sort of linked concept in intellectual property, which is the artist's moral rights. And very briefly, artist moral rights are the rights to be identified as the author of any work that you've created. Also, the right not to have something falsely attributed to you. But probably more importantly is the idea that your work should never be treated in a way that is derogatory or would make people think less of you as an artist. So I think that's where they're starting to think perhaps that's an area that could be brought into play to actually, in some ways, protect artists with their style. But at present, again, I don't think the law that exists would actually help them. Ethically, the idea of having some sort of ethical code or perhaps even incorporating a legal regulation which deals with this, I think is much more difficult because people's views are so different. We mentioned earlier the Ghibli studio, the whole idea of what's going on there and the use of their style. In Japan, this new law that they're thinking of bringing into place, it even splits people in Japan. So there are artists, I think in Japan, there are artists around the world who also want to use the AI and use these sorts of techniques of using other people's styles to develop their own art as well. So again, I'm not sure that everyone will have a consensus on this. So even though if you find that your work is being used and your style is being adopted by others, you know, human artists have always done this. The AI systems are doing this. I'm not sure how much we can actually restrict them, and I'm not sure we really should restrict the AI systems from doing this. I think what we need is probably to educate artists and say this is probably going to happen if you're good. If you're successful, then this is what's going to happen. People are going to imitate you as they always have. And we may need to think of artists exploiting their styles in a different way to be able to monetize it and benefit themselves. And again, encourage people to be creative rather than just saying, stop, you can't do that. Because I'm not sure we can stop people from doing it.
Yeah, so you mentioned about conflicting views. Do you think that the majority would be in favor of kind of like imposing moral rights or ethical codes to? this issue or not?
Well, it depends the majority of whom. I mean, if it's the majority of artists, I'm not even sure there's a majority in artists. If you talk with the public, and people talk about this just generally because everyone's so interested in AI and in generative AI, and it's so easy for us all to use it now. So a lot of people talk about it. A lot of people like using it. So I think if we started to say to them, you can't take a photograph or generate an image in the Ghibli style, they would be quite upset, some people, and they would start to say, well, why? And they wouldn't see why we should restrict. If we're thinking about in the sort of the AI industry, there aren't many ethics in the AI industry, I don't think. If we think about the big companies that have been involved in developing generative AI systems, from the very beginning, they've had issues. They've had issues with where they got their training data from. I'll pick on OpenAI again, OpenAI is very secretive about where it got its training data from the GPTs for the ChatGPT series. We can identify certain things because of what ChatGPT throws up to us. But again, I think there are 30 odd cases ongoing in the United States at the moment with authors taking action against OpenAI because they're saying that their copyrights have been violated. They're all at sort of varying stages. They're sort of a number of them are being brought together in New York, but I'm not sure if these artists are going to win even in those. And OpenAI is probably just happy to allow these things to continue, is not really worried about the morals or the ethics of the situation at all. So within the industry, I'm not sure anyone's that concerned.
I see. So basically, there's no, for example, guidelines for AI to kind of like train based on public domain art or anything. So they can just choose whatever they want.
Well, they have been. I mean, the first attempts using generative AI that gained a lot of recognition, because this is technology that's been around for a number of years. But the first public sort of awareness of it pre-ChatGPT, we had a portrait that was developed using digital art and using a generative AI system, which is called the Portrait of Edmund de Bellamy. And that was offered at a public auction and sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars and attracted a lot of attention. The artists and the computer scientists involved in developing that were very clear that they had used very old portraits because they were all out of copyright. So there was no sort of issues. They were all public domain, as you said. And that's, they were quite keen to stress this. I think that when we got the big companies involved, where they were really seeking to attract attention and wanted more users and of course wanted subscribers, I don't think they were that worried. They haven't bothered that much.
So it's kind of hard to ensure like AI respects the original artists and their creative contributions.
So far, most of the big systems haven't. And
I
that's why the
see.
authors are so upset, and that's why the authors are trying to take legal action. But as I said, I'm not sure they're going to be that successful, just because of our current intellectual property laws. And also, as I said, the idea within that industry, which is a very influential industry and a very popular industry, we all like generative AI. We all use our co-pilots and our DeepSeeks and everything else, and we're all enjoying this. To suddenly be told you can't do this anymore, or these are really going to be restricted in how you can use them, I'm not sure. It's a big sector of industry, and most jurisdictions are very keen to develop this. I'm not sure they want to over-regulate or restrict them.
Yeah, I feel like another problem would be like even if ethical codes are imposed in different jurisdictions, it's hard to reconcile between the differences between them, right?
Yeah,
Since
that's
yeah.
you're quite right. It's that sort of issue as well. If one jurisdiction brings in a law, we have laws to do with IP in certain jurisdictions. For example, Italy has certain laws to protect famous artworks in its museums or whatever else. Well, recently that sort of legislation has been challenged within the EU, and the EU says you can't do this. We've got to have consistent laws within the European Union. If we expand that out to the sort of the general ideas to do with intellectual property around the world, trying to get everyone to agree on a system, as you said, if one jurisdiction brought in a restriction, I'm not sure any other jurisdiction is going to respect that. If there were orders from that jurisdiction within courts, the enforcement of them, I think, would be a big problem. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a lost battle in many ways.
I feel like AI currently evolves really unpredictably and a bit really rapidly. So let's say like in 5 or 10 years, where do you see the intersection between kind of AI, art, and technology? And do like as you mentioned, there might have to be like changes in our legal framework to those evolvements and
I think things have slowed down a little bit in the development. I know that the AI industry itself keeps on telling us how fast it's going on, but we know that the old solution of just throwing lots of money doesn't seem to be working. We're seeing some innovative developments, DeepSeek coming in and saying, we didn't spend all that much money, we did other things. I think that's probably a good indication of how the industry will develop, and possibly some of these companies will actually start to make profits. Um, but for the art world, for the whole idea of AI, I think artists are just going to have to learn how to use the AI, and again, how to get the best use of their art, knowing that it's probably going to be used by AI at some point in different ways, and think how perhaps they can benefit from that, use it as a tool. Artists have always use technology, and there've been big threats before when they had the advent of photography, when cameras first came in and people saw photographs. Famously, Turner in England, the landscape artist, famously said, this is the end of art. I'm glad I had my day, because he thought that was it, there would be no more paintings, why would you need them? Well, of course, artists developed the styles of art into impressionism and cubism and other things, and of course some artists started using cameras and photography. So I think a lot of good artists are already thinking, how can we use this technology? And I think that's what they've got to do. They've got to evolve with the
mm,
technology.
yeah, I feel like the industry could always find a way out of this. Yeah,
Yeah, I
based on
think so.
history and
There's always artists who do take these ideas on and use them and actually benefit. Um, and we may see big developments in what we consider to be art in the future because of this new technology.
I see. So I feel like the public isn't too aware about such issues. So are there any ways we could raise their awareness or educate them on the copyright issues or anything about that?
Sure. I mean, podcasts like this are very useful. It's good to have publicity going out generally to people about some of the issues that may arise. Um, I think again, a number of the universities in Hong Kong are organising seminars. CUHK Law are organising lots of seminars to do with the intellectual property and AI issues, and we have been for a number of years. And also, of course, the government has been uh, very keen to push digital technology generally, and in particular AI. And as part of that, I know that the government has also been organising, for a number of years, it's been organising big conferences to do with intellectual property, mainly for sort of entrepreneurs and other people in business who perhaps need a little bit of help with their intellectual property and their understanding of it. But in recent years, what they've been doing is also introducing speakers talking about the issues that AI raises with the intellectual property as well. So the information is out there. We have a number of people in Hong Kong in particular are sort of trying to help people understand. Uh, but that's it. Yeah, more education is always a good thing.
Yeah. So with education kind of comes a bit of social pressure when people have more awareness towards these issues. Do you think that it's possible for social pressure to rise to a point where AI is kind of like succumbs to this kind of pressure and decides not to infringe rights or
I think, again, some people are going to get quite angry about it, but I don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think we're going to see crowds of people with pitchforks and trying to smash AI computers or whatever else, because, as I said, we're all using it and we're all benefiting from our use of it. Hopefully we're all using it cautiously, but we're using it, and a lot of people are enjoying using it, and that's where I think it would be a problem now. You can't really put the genie back in the bottle. It's out there already, and I think to get a groundswell where you'd have enough people actually saying we need to do something about it, we need to restrict it in some ways, I think it's too late for that.
yeah, probably. And also like not only for art, but also like literature or any kind of
Mm.
sort of creative art like forms of work that require creativity. I feel like we can't restrict that from being exposed or exploited by AI.
I don't think we can. It's not. I'm cautious about the idea of creativity. I think humans create machines generate. So I think
Mm.
that's the difference. But yeah, it's great to be able to, ask Copilot quickly to draft a poem or something or whatever else. This is, really interesting. And lots of people are making use of it. If you need a quick post for your social media or whatever else, if you need whatever, this is great. It's time saving. Um, Used cautiously, but it's all forms of art really that have to be not concerned, but aware of what's going on. And as I said, I think all artists, and that's whether you're an artist of the written word, whether you're an artist who's painting or drawing or sculpting, whatever, they need to be aware and perhaps thinking about how best they can use these tools, because that's what AI is. It's a tool, and it should really be used by the artist to actually produce perhaps more interesting and new forms of art.
Yeah, indeed. So before we wrap up, is there anything or is there any big takeaway you would like for our audience to have as we proceed towards the end of this podcast?
Not really just, the AI is there. It's easy to use. There are so many sort of freely available versions of it. I think people should play with the AI and see what they can do if they want to generate digital images, if they want to generate text or whatever. And again, as I said, for artists, just to remember that, again, this is a tool they should be looking to use, and also thinking of how that maybe will affect their work in the future and that their work could be used by the AI. Don't get too frightened of it, and don't think it's the end of art and the end of artists, because it isn't. Because again, technology changes have happened which were so radical in the past that artists were very worried about their futures and literally whether they were going to earn a living, and they've adapted. They adapted very well, and we ended up with innovative new forms of art, which we're all enjoying today. So I think there'll be interesting things in the future.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. It's clear that as AI advances, not only does it raise profound questions as to legal rights, but it also raises questions surrounding respecting the creativity as well as the cultural significance of different artists. Thank you, Professor Gallagher, for being here with us today and for your invaluable insights.
Thank you.
We hope that today's conversation has allowed you to think more critically into the future of art, technology, as well as law. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, share this video with your friends, as well as follow our social media for more updates. In the coming episodes, we will also be inviting more CUHK members to share about fascinating topics, so please do remember to stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Bye!